The wind sliced through the narrow streets of Willow Creek, a small town in upstate New York, carrying the sharp bite of early winter. It was the kind of cold that crept under your collar, no matter how tightly you buttoned your coat. And on this late November evening in 2025, it seemed to cling to everything it touched. The sun had long dipped below the horizon, leaving behind a sky streaked with gray and lavender, and the streetlights flickered with a tired glow, as if they, too, were weary of the season. At the edge of town, where the sidewalk cracked and the grass grew wild, an old bus stop stood alone, its rusted bench empty save for the occasional drift of dead leaves. People hurried past, some with grocery bags straining at their wrists, others with eyes glued to their phones, all eager to escape the chill. None of them noticed her. She was an elderly woman, her small frame wrapped in a faded emerald coat that hung loosely on her shoulders. Her silver hair, once neatly pinned, now spilled in wisps from beneath a knit cap, and her hands, gnarled but delicate, clutched a worn leather purse as if it were her only anchor. Her name was Margaret Voss. Though she hadn't spoken it aloud in hours, she stood at the curb, her eyes darting to every passing car, her lips moving in a faint murmur, something about the number 9 bus, about a street called Maple Grove that didn't exist in Willow Creek. Every few moments, she stepped forward, then retreated, her face clouded with confusion. Fear flickered in her chest, a quiet panic she couldn't quite name, like a child lost in a crowd, waiting for someone to claim her. Not far away, a young man paused to catch his breath. His name was Jamal Carter, 18 years old, with a lean frame stretched thin by hunger and time. His brown skin glistened with sweat despite the cold, and his dark eyes, sharp but weary, scanned the street ahead. He wore a faded denim jacket, patched at the elbows, and sneakers that were more duct tape than leather. His bicycle, a creaking relic that had belonged to his late mother, leaned against a nearby bench. Its rusted chain groaned with every turn, and the back rack wobbled precariously. But it was his lifeline. Orphaned at 15, Jamal had learned to survive on the edges of Willow Creek, delivering groceries, prescriptions, and odd parcels for just enough cash to afford a cot in a boarding house. Tonight, he had one last delivery to make, a small package due by 8 p. If he made it, he'd have enough to cover his rent for another week. If not, the landlord's warning echoed in his mind. The lock would change, and he'd be out in the cold. Jamal tightened the strap of his delivery bag, his fingers stiff from the wind. He was about to pedal off when his gaze caught Margaret's silhouette. Something about her stillness stopped him, not the stillness of someone waiting, but of someone unmoored. She turned, looked at the empty road, then down at her own feet, as if they belonged to a stranger. Her voice, faint and trembling, carried on the breeze. Maple Grove, or was it Cedar? The 9 bus, did I miss it? The words were fragile, like glass about to shatter, and they pierced Jamal's chest. He glanced at his phone. 7. Cuore de p. 18 minutes to make the delivery. 18 minutes to keep a roof over his head. But as Margaret took another hesitant step toward the curb, her purse slipping from her grip, Jamal's heart lurched. He couldn't look away. He pushed his bike toward her, the wheels squeaking softly. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, his voice low, careful not to startle her. "You okay?" Margaret blinked, her pale blue eyes meeting his with a mix of surprise and suspicion. I'm trying to get home," she said, her voice thin, like a thread about to snap. "But the bus, I think it didn't come. Or maybe I'm at the wrong stop." She laughed, a brittle sound that broke Jamal's heart. He nodded, his throat tight. "Where's home? Maybe I can help." She fumbled with her purse, pulling out a handkerchief, a few coins, a bus ticket from yesterday. No address, no phone. Jamal's eyes caught a glint of silver at her neck, a delicate chain with a small pendant. He leaned closer, squinting in the dim light. Engraved in fine script were the words, "Margaret Voss, 72 Pine Ridge Lane, North Hill." His breath caught. Pine Ridge was on the far side of town, a good hour and a half by bike, mostly uphill. The clock in his mind ticked louder. 7. 45 p. He'd never make the delivery. He'd lose his room, his only shelter. But as he looked into Margaret's eyes, soft and clouded with fear, he saw something else. Trust, fragile and unearned, simply because he'd stopped to ask. Jamal forced a smile, though his chest ached with the weight of the choice. "That's a bit far, but we'll get you there," he said, his voice steadier than he felt. He helped Margaret onto the back rack of his bike, tying his spare scarf around the seat for cushion and draping his jacket over her shoulders. "Hold on tight." "All right. We'll take it slow." Margaret chuckled, her voice dazed but warm. "You're a kind boy. Reminds me of my grandson, always running around, always helping." Jamal didn't correct her. He just nodded and began to pedal. The road stretched out, dark and endless, the town's lights fading behind them. The sky deepened to a bruised purple, and the wind grew sharper, stinging Jamal's face. His legs burned with every turn of the pedals. The uphill climb, relentless. Behind him, Margaret hummed a tune, sometimes trailing off, sometimes pausing to ask, "Are we close?" Only to forget she'd asked moments later. Jamal answered each time, his voice gentle, "Almost there. Don't worry. Just over the next hill." His breath came in short bursts, his hands numb on the handlebars. But he kept going, driven by a quiet resolve he couldn't explain. It wasn't just about getting her home, it was about proving to himself or to the world that he was more than his circumstances. They passed frost-covered fields and bridges lit only by moonlight. Once, Jamal stopped at a gas station, using his last dollar to buy Margaret a cup of tea. She insisted he take the first sip, her voice firm yet tender. "You need it more." "Child," the words hit him like a memory of his mother, and for a moment, he had to look away to hide the sting in his eyes. When they finally reached 72 Pine Ridge Lane, a grand house with ivy-clad gates, it was nearly 9. 3 to P. Jamal's legs trembled, his body spent, but relief flooded him as he knocked on the door. An older man, Margaret's butler, opened it, his face shifting from panic to gratitude. "Miss Voss, we've been searching everywhere." Margaret smiled vaguely. "I went for a walk. Or a ride, I suppose." She glanced at Jamal, her eyes softening. The butler urged Jamal to come inside, offering food and a ride back. But Jamal shook his head, exhaustion mingling with a quiet pride. "I'm good. Just make sure she's okay." He scribbled his number on a scrap of paper, handed it over, and rode off into the dark, unaware that his kindness had set something extraordinary in motion. By the time Jamal reached Willow Creek, the cold had settled into his bones. His knuckles ached, and every bump in the road rattled through him. The boarding house was silent, the porch light off. He reached for his key, only to find his pocket empty. Panic surged as he checked every seam, every fold. "Nothing." He knocked, softly at first, then louder. No answer. Then he saw it, a plastic bag by the door, stuffed with his belongings, a spare shirt, a towel, a cracked charger. A note taped to the door read, "Past due." Locks changed. His breath caught, sharp and painful. For a moment, he stood frozen, the weight of the night crashing down. He'd done the right thing, but at what cost? Jamal turned back to town, pedaling slowly, his body screaming for rest. Near midnight, he reached Johnson's Market, a corner store where he sometimes worked odd jobs. He knocked on the back door. "And Mr. Johnson," a gruff but kind man, opened it, taking one look at Jamal's hollow eyes. "Didn't make rent?" "Huh." Jamal nodded, too tired to speak. "Mr. Johnson sighed, stepping aside. "Storeroom's dry. Cot's in the corner. Don't freeze on me." Jamal murmured a thank you and collapsed onto the cot, the blanket thin but warm enough. As he drifted to sleep, Margaret's voice echoed in his mind. You remind me of someone I love." For the first time in weeks, he wasn't afraid to close his eyes. Morning came quietly, a pale gray light filtering through the storeroom's dusty window. Jamal rose, folding the blanket with care, and joined Mr. Johnson at the front counter. The older man slid him a banana and a lukewarm coffee. No words needed. Jamal stood by the window, watching the town stir, cars humming, kids trudging to school. It felt like any other day, until a sleek black car pulled up, its polished frame out of place on Willow Creek's gritty streets. A tall man in a tailored coat stepped out, glancing at a slip of paper before locking eyes with Jamal through the glass. The bell chimed as he entered. "I'm looking for Jamal Carter," he said, his voice smooth but weighted. Jamal froze. "That's me." The man's face softened. "Miss Margaret Voss sent me. She remembers everything and wants to thank you." She insisted. Mr. Johnson raised an eyebrow but stayed silent. The man, who introduced himself as Charles, held the door open. She's waiting. If you're willing. Jamal hesitated, the idea of stepping into Margaret's world feeling like crossing an invisible line. He was just a kid with nothing, no home, no family. He'd only wanted to help. But Mr. Johnson shrugged, his voice gruff. Go. The cot's here if you need it. With a deep breath, Jamal followed Charles. The drive to Pine Ridge was surreal in daylight. The hills less daunting, the trees stark but beautiful. When they reached the house, Charles led Jamal to a sunlit room filled with books and warmth. Margaret sat by the window, her eyes sharp, her hair neatly pinned. When she saw Jamal, her face lit up. You, she said, her voice trembling with gratitude. You brought me home. She took his hands, her grip firm. I remember every moment, every street, every word. You didn't treat me like a stranger. You made me feel safe. Jamal bowed his head, the praise overwhelming. I just wanted you to be okay, he murmured. Margaret leaned forward, her eyes searching his. I don't know your story, but I'd like to. This house has too many rooms and not enough kindness. Stay not just for a night, but for as long as you need. Jamal blinked, the offer catching him off guard. Part of him wanted to refuse. He hadn't helped her for reward. But her sincerity, the warmth in her eyes, stirred something deep within him. He didn't answer right away, the silence heavy but kind. That night, Jamal returned to the storeroom, but something had shifted. He'd been seen not for his struggles, but for his heart. The next morning, Margaret appeared at the market, alone this time, her presence softer but no less determined. I've been thinking of you all night, she said, her voice warm. She handed him a handwritten note, not a contract, but an invitation to stay at her estate, with a stipend and a promise to help him return to school. You remind me of my grandson, she added, her voice catching. When you helped me, something in me woke up. Jamal read the note, his hands trembling. The world seemed to slow, the sounds of the town fading. Finally, he met her eyes, his voice steady. I'd like that. That afternoon, Charles drove him to Pine Ridge, his few belongings packed in a backpack. Mr. Johnson handed him a bag of sandwiches, muttering, about time. Life at the estate was quiet, not lavish. Jamal had a room overlooking the garden, time to rest, and, within weeks, a scholarship in his name to finish high school. Together, he and Margaret built the Pine Light Fund, a foundation to support young people with potential but no path, and elders forgotten by time. Jamal helped shape its programs, worked at its community center, and sometimes rode his old bike through town, not out of need but to remember. Each time he passed the bus stop, he'd smile, knowing home wasn't just a place, it was the people you chose to walk with in the dark. If this story touched your heart, join us at H Stories for more tales of hope and humanity. Hit the like and subscribe buttons, and turn on the notification bell to never miss a story that reminds us what it means to be human.